Hello, everyone. My name is Evan here at the Inner Work with Evan, and I'm with one of my, you could say, role models in this space, which is relevant to the topic. That is Brad Yates. Brad, thanks for hanging out today.
Oh, my pleasure, Evan. I always enjoy spending time with you.
Likewise, likewise, yeah. And so we're talking about a pretty interesting subject. So you and I have anecdotally commented on the fact that in some of Brad's calls, not just Brad's, other things I've done, including even my certification for clinical EFT, that it's not uncommon that I might be literally the only man on the call. And if not, the percentages are heavily, heavily skewed. So there's often very few men in this work or similar types of emotional work. And so we really want to take a look at that and some ideas as to why that might be happening, some of the misconceptions, and why I think it's actually a really, really important thing. Because when we say that stuff, like, oh, I'm the only guy on the call, it can be one of those things you kind of laugh off real easily. But I actually don't think it's a laughing matter. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, absolutely. There is obviously, as you said, it's very skewed. The when I'm doing an event, there might be a couple of guys, and with my calls, the numbers tend to be about 80-20, but sometimes it'll be closer to 99-1.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it does, because as guys there is a vulnerability, a sensitivity to being in a situation like that. Of, well, I need to maintain an image, or I need to not ask for directions. I need to not show any kind of weakness, and so there is that limitation in terms of being able to be fully engaged in the work, and for guys entering the practice, coming in as practitioners, there is a there there there's an awareness of it, and that can be there of what's is there something wrong here that I'm doing this? Is this not a is this not, are men not allowed here? And if I feel that I'm here, I should be here. Is there something a little bit off about me? That questioning that, not necessarily. It's, and I'm not saying that's where I'm on a daily basis going, how did I get into this profession? This is a woman's profession. Not, I don't think about that, but I do see that because of the way it is like that, that there can be that perception and that feeling.
Yeah, there's a couple aspects that create, I think, this sort of perpetual cycle where if there are less men, then if you are one of the men who is there, then it can start to feel like what you're saying, like why am I the only one here? And even some of the languaging, some of the outreach, and we'll explore that a little bit because I have some personal experiences as well, and also just to the severity of it. I don't know if you've become familiar with some of these statistics that are coming out, but some of the people I listen to, involved in this type of different work, and like Gabor Mate and different people like that, like the death of despair rate for men is super high, multiples times higher, 3 to 4 times higher, something like that. Whereas, women have their own things, right? We each have our own sort of statistics, but there's some really brutal things happening with men. And one of the most interesting ones, I mean, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but um, the words for the men who have like gone down that far down that road, their last words often use the words worthless and useless. So it's not, it's that aspect of like value and contribution, which I think is really relevant. So there is this element of like purpose and importance that does feel missing. It's almost cliche to say right now, but what I think is so interesting is the type of like emotional work that you're engaged in EFT actually does provide a real solution. Why I think this is so important to bring out, because it's not what I think people think it is, and we'll get into that in a second. But it's what I think is a very real part of the equation to a potential solution to a very, very real problem.
It's so interesting that you say that and speak about Gabor Mate, because I'm going through his book right now. I was just
Oh,
listening to it on my walk this morning. And I have been intending to do a post where I have a picture of his book and it says, Verdict, stress is a real problem. And then a picture of Peter's book, The Science Behind Tapping. Verdict, tapping is a real solution.
mm,
As Dr. Mate, you know, gives the narrative about what's going on and what's going wrong with society and culture and people and I just listen to it and I go, there's never been a time where what we are up to with this work has been more important.
yeah.
This is why I'm on such a mission to make tapping as routine as brushing your teeth,
Mm,
for people to have a daily practice of dealing with stressors. I, and I haven't gotten yet to any part where, as far as I know, he doesn't mention tapping. He certainly refers a lot to Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is a big proponent of EFT
mm,
in terms of trauma and stress. So, yeah, absolutely. This, given the ills of society, what we're able to do with tapping is one of the most useful things that could be done
yeah.
in my humble opinion. you know
Yeah,
Not to put, and it's not trying to put myself or my profession, our profession, up on a pedestal. It's just a recognition of, you look at what's going on in the world and you look at the horrible things that go on, and it's like, yeah, people are manifesting stress and trauma because they don't have a healthy outlet. They are not addressing it. It's not being dealt with. So
absolutely.
we can try to come up with all kinds of things to, fix healthcare and fix the education system and fix the monetary system and all that. It's like, but people, underneath all of these things are people. And you can sit there and try to, fix it's like, trying to wash the car, but not deal with the engine.
Absolutely. And I would say if I have an idea or a goal with what I'm trying to do, it's a very similar thing where I think even very fundamental understanding of emotional, let's call it emotional work. Although we'll get into that too, because that there's not a good term yet. There's only really self-improvement, and that's part of the barrier. Because if you search self-improvement for men, and I was doing that before this, we were looking up terms, seeing like, what does a guy even search for? And if you search for certain things, it's going to be completely dominated by a much more kind of goal oriented approach. And there's not a popular term out there. So, my channel is Inner Work with Evan. Inner Work gets some traction, but just to even literally be aware that it exists, even if it's not tapping that, oh, there's an actual process that can be done where we can not just try to tackle challenges and get more discipline. All of that stuff is cool, but you can actually work with your emotions directly without the middleman of success and achievement. And
Yeah, so much of the personal development stuff out there for men is, there's no emotion involved. You just work harder. You crush the competition. You make as much money as possible. You impress everybody, and it's still this old school. And I have nothing against being successful. I'm all in favor of, making the biggest impact you can make, but at the cost of your soul, or without addressing it, because there are plenty of people like that who have all that success. It's cliche. The person
yes,
who has it all, quote unquote, and is drinking themselves to death, or has gone through multiple marriages, or is popping pills like crazy, or whatever, because they haven't dealt with their humanity. It's just and so, yeah, this holistic success and living your best life. I mean, that's why I have my one of my taglines is feel better, do better, live better. But if you're not feeling better, what's the It's like, the golden rule: he who has the most gold wins. It's like, yeah,
Hmm.
if you haven't dealt with this, excuse me, and yeah, and that's missing from so much, but we're still very much in that mindset, and it's still put out there. I see the ads constantly. I see the ads running on some of my at the beginning of some of my videos. I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, I wish that wasn't running on my video. It's this, this riches at all cost, and nothing about who you are as a person. So, and it's not an either or. That's the thing. It's not an either or. You can win holistically.
Yeah, absolutely. And now let's take a little look here at why I think, and I'm curious to get your thoughts because ideally, what I don't see in a lot of these discussions is any practical solutions. Like the video ends with, "We need to get more men involved," and so we could start with why I think there are less involved and some. So here's a specific story without naming the technique or the person. I was in my 20s, I forget the exact age, probably later 20s, mid to late 20s. And I went on a retreat, 7 day kind of like advanced retreat for a technique that's all emotional work. And it's pretty intensive, right? It's not like just talking and hanging out. It's
Mhm.
you're there to really do some work. And so, of course, skewed more women than men. But one guy got up there and fairly tame, right? But he said, I'm in a relationship. I really love my girlfriend. Forget if it was wife or girlfriend. Doesn't really matter. But there's times I see other women and I feel attraction or something along those lines, right? Man, okay. So probably 60% of the women in the room went, ooh. And that was the only subject the whole week where the whole room turned into this like, oh, that silly men doing the
Yeah.
men thing. And the host actually kind of went with that, kind of laughed it off. And that was so impactful for me. I was like, oh, so we can't even go here. We can't even
Yeah.
go here. I
Yeah.
mean,
Shut them down.
and
Yeah, bad boy, shut up. Go
and
sit
you want
down.
to talk about the stuff I had going on, which was like 100 times darker than that. So I'm like, great. We can't even broach the lightest subject. You think we're going to talk about like sexual frustration, anger towards women, anger about rejection, success as revenge, like, which by the way are some of the things that men might click on because no one's tapping on that or talking about that. But
Right, right, right.
this is part of why it's not happening. And I know that everyone thought that moment was harmless, and because the energy wasn't super judgmental. If you watched a video of it, it would have looked kind of light, fairly lighthearted. But to me, it just said everything that needed to be said about what
Right.
this week was really, really like.
And for him up on stage, yeah, what you would see objectively and what he would have felt subjectively, yeah, it'd be like, yeah. And that's this thing in society and culture of men aren't allowed to show weakness. Um, and I'm going to be very careful here because it's why women are able to go to these events and is that there is it's more acceptable. And please, any women who might happen to watch this, do not hear me as going, women have it so much better than men do. Not even remotely.
Right.
I am not unaware at all of how skewed society is in favor of men in most aspects. But in terms of developing, but the unfortunate thing is that one of the things that is so difficult for women is that men are not more developed emotionally, and yet society does not support that. It's frowned upon. You're just supposed to be a success, a breadwinner, this, and so and even in terms of our profession, it's like, if you're going to go into the healing arts, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to have an MD. PhD. You're not going to be in some kind of frou-frou alternative kind of thing. And so there's that. It's not as socially acceptable, given how that's set up. So yeah, that example right there it's, I mean, it's such a metaphor
Hmm.
for so many things.
Yeah, and it speaks to the environment because this is part of it. Like you said, if you are one of the few men in such a setting, this could be something of use for. I know you wouldn't obviously have done that, but for those of us who kind of are running calls or creating spaces, so to speak, and for women who say they want men to come up and talk, you had best be willing to hear what they actually have to say.
Yeah.
For example, I'm attracted to other women. I mean, like if that is met with the tone it was met in that workshop, you're going to reinforce, see, I shouldn't have even bothered. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have talked. So, I think it goes on both the host and the participant side to, like, as best we can, have a tone. And I think the leader of the call, of the workshop, whatever, helps set that tone of, no,
Yes.
no, everything is welcome here.
Yeah.
And you're actually congratulated in a way for bringing up something that is quote unquote bad or normally would be frowned upon. Like, wow, you had the courage to come up here and admit that you're experiencing that, and you actually want to work through it. We should encourage this. We should delve all the way into it, just as much as if you had gone up there and said, I was in a car accident, or my wife was in a car accident. You think the tone would be like, whatever, bro, get over it. you
Right.
know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's key, I think.
Right. And it's creating that safe space. And even as I say it, it's like I can hear guys going, I'm a guy. I don't need a safe space.
I was just gonna. That's part of my notes. Yep, that term won't work, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea that we would need a safe space shows weakness,
Right.
but without that safe space, we can't go anywhere. So we're stuck. It's like, this is, you know, you're a guy. This is how it's going to be. Again, not saying, oh, it's so much harder to be a guy. I just point out that is where, we have these continuing cycles of toxic masculinity, because they're for so many people, there's no other option. It's like,
Absolutely. And some of those other misconceptions. Well, men are supposed to shoulder it all, is sort of like a cultural thing that's in the air. Some of I think there are certain ideas that are in the air that a lot of men kind of absorb without necessarily realizing it, and that you hear as sort of tropes, or even the cliche kind of bumbling guy idiot in movies, or the sitcoms and stuff. I put a couple of them down here. One of the misconceptions is that men are actually less emotional, and there's an interesting study done where you know scientifically they had a man and woman kind of get into an emotional situation or an argument. I was just listening to this morning, and while the man looked quite stoic, his actual biomarkers of stress were higher and actually stayed higher longer. So the inability to express, or the training, some might be nature, some might be nurture, to kind of appear deer in
yeah,
headlights in
yeah,
such a situation, is in no way a representation of what's actually happening
yeah.
under the hood, or the amount of stress and intensity that's actually being felt.
Well, it's like the old line, what you resist persists. And
Mhm.
as we resist acknowledging those emotions or expressing them, then they persist. And yeah, that's fascinating that the biomarker is like, yeah, yeah, don't be fooled by the exterior. This guy's a nut job right now.
Yep.
uh, you
Yes,
know,
absolutely.
but we can't show that. We're not supposed to show emotions. We're not often not allowed to. And and get that training either explicitly or implicitly, uh,
Mhm.
you know from what we've been told, from what we have experienced, what we watched from other role models, from from movies, television, whatever. The woman is emotional and the man is stoic, and if you feel anything, snuff that out, stamp it down. It's like, it's got to go someplace.
Yep. And it can be kind of like in that workshop where, well, if I do express it, it's just not going to go well. And I
Yeah,
think a lot of guys get that sort of firsthand evidence in their history where if they do actually say what they're feeling, even though they might be encouraged, like, yeah, just say what you feel, then you do it and it doesn't go well.
it's
Now
shot
your
down.
odds are way worse of that ever happening again.
Yeah, yeah. So you're going to take that feeling, and I mean, it's like having food poisoning and having this urge to throw up. You no, don't do that. You're not allowed to. I gotta, and you're going through life holding it down, and that manifests in all kinds of unfortunate things. And so we look at the behavior. We're very, as I'm going through Garamate's book, just the whole cause and effect thing, and we are so focused on as a society on effects and being upset about the effects and not looking at the causes. And we look at toxic behavior and shame people for the behavior, or we criminalize them or whatever. And his whole thing is, no, you got to look at where it's coming from, whether it's their behavior or how it manifests as illness, physical or mental or emotional. It's like, what happened to you? What's the cause? And and so we just are saying to all these people, we have no time for your cause. We have no time to hear about it. Just we don't want to see the effects. And then those effects blow up in all kinds of really unfortunate ways. So yeah, we really need to deal with, hey, people are struggling, people are suffering, people have the ACEs scale, and it's always on a spectrum. We talk about mental health. There's a group that I'm involved with called Same Here, and it's a mental health initiative. And they talk about, every year in Mental Health Awareness Month in May, they talk about 1 in 5 people has a mental health issue, and they're like, no, five in
Yes.
five people. We're all on a spectrum. Same with physical health. We say, oh, that person's sick, but it's like, oh, because today I have a bug, but yesterday, I had a stiffness in my neck, so I wasn't 100% healthy yesterday either. There's this spectrum of well-being. There's a spectrum of happiness. There's a spectrum of everything that we're on, and there's this expectation of where you should be in a certain range,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not one or the other, this or that. And allowing ourselves to go, everybody's in the same boat. It's a big club and we're all in it, and creating that space of going, let's just acknowledge that, let's let go of tropes about what a man is and what a woman is, and what these expectations are, and say, look, people are hurt. Some of these hurts are bigger than others, but the worst hurt is the one that you feel. And let's
Yeah.
say, hey, everybody, let's take some time and deal with that, and create opportunities for that. That's what we're up to. Well, and you're up to it with your music as well as your coaching, creating that, healing and nurturing the soul. But there's that, but yeah, really creating this environment. You're saying, create an environment where nurturing humanity in men as well as women is not just accepted, but it's just done. It's just what it is. It's like, why else? Why wouldn't you?
Right, right. And I think that falls all into another misconception because of those factors. Like there are less men there to begin with and men might appear more stoic, that men are not actually interested in emotional work. I don't think that's true. I think it's a lack of exposure. I think it's a lack of the right language that would actually resonate, and the lack of correct, I don't know, environments
Yeah.
where, just, if I see something and there's no store that speaks to me in any way, it doesn't mean I'm not interested at all in the subject. It's just not landing or not presented. So I think there's a big misconception that men just aren't interested. And then, of course, we both have a YouTube channel. Yours is much bigger than mine. But then your stats will reflect, oh, I have more women, so I should make more content for more women. And most of my sales, if you're a coach in this space, might be from women. So your marketing gets more. So it just keeps
Yeah.
feeding this.
Yeah. When I hired a marketing team, they were like, Brad, your audience is mostly women, and all the marketing you've done for yourself is very masculine. So you're missing the point. Um, I've always avoided catering videos towards any kind of audience or any kind of, here's what the market wants, which,
Yep.
I could probably have a bigger channel if I played by those rules, because that's what they always say is, look at what your audience wants and see what they're doing, and now cater. It's like, no, I take my marching orders from a higher source.
Yeah.
It's like I get an instinct of, here's what'll help people, men, women, whoever, and that's where it goes. But yeah, it's even a thing of not being allowed to be interested. If you say to another guy, I'm interested in exploring emotions, you might get beat up, you know, emotionally, if not physically. Imagine in high school standing around with the guys in the locker room and going, I was thinking of, I was watching this video where they were tapping on emotions. It's like, loser, because it's this fear of appearing um, unmasculine. And so, and everybody else in that room might be thinking, God, I wish I could check that out. I've got all of this stuff inside, but no, 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 it's not there. It's not there. Let's go talk about women and drinking and stuff. And I'm not saying that all guys are like that, but there's definitely a lot of trends towards that.
Mhm.
So there isn't that allowance. So as you said, there's not the opportunity. Most people don't know that it's available, um, but they're not even allowed to explore it because you're shamed, you're outcast sometimes if you go exploring that. And we need to need. I always say need is a four-letter word. So
Well, it
it's
might be applicable in this case.
yeah,
There's some stuff needs to happen, I
it
think.
would certainly be beneficial if that kind of openness to exploring that and allowing people to be interested in that and say, oh, I might like to work with people like that, and I can see where there'd be all kinds of healing in this world and all kinds of social situations that would be solved
Mhm.
if this was the case.
It's one of the most interesting ones to me, and this is the one I want to find more ways to lean into, present, distinguish, is that, okay, if you take a session with Brad or you do an advance call or you go through something on my channel, emotional work, inner work, like I said, there's not like a well-known term, which kind of bugs me. It's not talking about your feelings. And men can often be averse to that, and the image they get of doing this type of work is like, I'm going to sit there and complain to Brad, and he's just going to tell me, just tell me more about your feelings, tell me more about your feelings. But when you start exploring what some of this emotional work is, and it doesn't matter if it's EFT, there's other ones, option method, Byron Katie stuff, Sedona method was the first one I did. um, it is a very rich experience. It is not just, I'm just going to sit here and complain or talk about my feelings. It is
Yeah.
a very physical, visceral, emotional. It's a skill. It's an art. It has all of the things that make you want to be a better basketball player or a better hunter or a better fisherman or better musician. It has all these nuances in doing emotional work, and that is like what I wish I could get on a mountaintop and say, no, 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 we're not hanging out talking about, oh, my mom yelled at me when I was 5, and everyone goes, oh, you're such a poor boy. There's nothing wrong with that, but that is not, that is
And that
exactly why men
and
are
those
averse.
things will come up, but it's not, yeah, it's not, we're just going to sit here and it, yeah. I put out a video, and I didn't create it. This compilation of pro athletes and Olympic athletes tapping.
Mm,
I know a woman who is a sports psychologist for top level athletes, Super Bowl and World Series winning teams, I believe, and says, "Oh yeah, these guys love it."
yeah.
So there are very macho guys at the top of physical, you know, expertise who are doing this work, but not openly.
Hmm.
And
Sure.
whether
Not their
whether it's,
job to promote
yeah,
it, but
yeah, and whether that's, I don't want people to know that I'm doing it because, you know emotional work, or it could be, well, this is part of my edge. I don't
mhm,
want
yeah, yeah,
I don't want everybody to know what my secret weapon is.
absolutely.
Um, in terms of what to call it, instead of personal development, some people use the term personal growth, because growth does have a little bit more of a human uh, component to it than just development or success. This growing as a human. Um, yeah, I don't know what to. We haven't found the perfect thing to explain it, but it is that, you know call it personal evolution. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's the act of doing this type of work. I mean, it's quite literally the hero's journey. It's in a lot of ways because you are confronting. You're going to be looking at your things that you're most afraid of, and a good facilitator is not going to dunk your head there on the first session. But in order to get you there, boy, it is not. It couldn't be less flowery and just, oh, I'm just going to complain. You're going to be like seeing the stuff where your body really tenses up and freezes because you're so terrified of something, and that's what put it in the nervous system in the first place, and now you're actually going to go back and look
I'm
at
just
it.
thinking towards the hero's journey. My favorite of the Star Wars movies is Empire Strikes Back,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the stuff that happens during Luke's training with Yoda on Dagobah, and when he goes into the cave and confronts Vader, he says, "What will I find? Only what you take with you." And it's right there. And just imagine audiences going, "Oh, boo,
Yeah.
therapy crap."
Right. You know why that's a perfect example too, because that's kind of what we're kind of flushing out and kind of putting the invitation out there, because Joseph Campbell, that's storytelling. It's packaging the message in the right way that speaks to
Yeah.
the audience. Whereas if you just describe it literally, if it was just a literal movie about Luke going and say, "Hey, Luke, you're going to confront yourself," and then it loses the interest.
Yeah.
So that's part of the nuance
Throw
of
lightsabers in there and it's awesome.
yeah, and doing emotional work is kind of like that. I mean, there are elements of tensity and battle, and like one part of me is fighting with another part, and I have to kind of find my inner space to be in the middle and reconcile that energy, and you know
Yeah. And,
but
and try to find that Zen place of, so I have up on my wall the Walt Whitman quote: "Be curious, not judgmental."
mhm.
To always try to go into this work with whatever we're confronting, because there's so many times just looking at the story that you told of the guy going up and in front of the audience saying, "I look at other women." Even in a one-to-one session, people are afraid to say that.
Correct.
It's like, some guy could be talking to me, and talking to another man might be afraid of saying, "Well, I have these thoughts, I have these feelings, I, you know." and even in the safety of that space, there's this, no, 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 you don't reveal that. You do not reveal that.
Right.
And we're not supposed to ask for help. We're not supposed to show weakness, and not even recognize, no, this is where the real strength is.
Yeah.
You know, Yoda sent Luke in there because he wants to turn him into a Jedi Knight.
Hmm.
This is not, I'm trying to weaken you to become, some kind of shrinking violet. I'm trying to turn you into the hero that you can be, and you've got to be able to confront what what's there. And it's like, here's what's here, and I'm going to keep going in and doing the self work and looking at that. Um, I do this. I was just telling you about some things that were upsetting me this morning, and I get upset with myself for having being upset about it. It's like,
Hmm.
you're supposed to be this guy who, is totally chill and loving everybody and never gets upset with people. It's like, no. If I ignore that and I say, no, 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 I don't feel that, I can't grow. It's gotta be acceptable, if not mandatory,
Hmm.
to be able to look at these things that keep us from being our most expansive self.
Yeah, and if you look at where men are going in the alternative, it kind of reveals that there is a big interest. There's just a lack of often places to said awareness that such work even exists, and then a lack of places where they feel like they can talk about the things that are really relevant to them. And where do find those? Well, there's like forums, which can very quickly turn into a cesspool, not because everyone on them is bad, but because it has the attractive factors, right? You have the anonymity
Yeah.
and you have the ability to really overthink your response. You have the ability to be all kind of, left brain about it. And you have the ability to put on a front and create the facade. So a lot of like the men's group kind of stuff is very text based. It's very thought out. It's you get to carefully like, I'm cool, but I just have this one little thing. Whereas if you are in something like a live event or a workshop or working with someone one on one, you might try to play it cool, but it's going to be in your face. It's going to be in your body language. It's going to be in the energy that comes out. And that's where all the real magic happens. And if you can kind of, get that through that, again, men often like to do these things in isolation. So I'll read the book, I'll go on the forum if I have a question, and I'll just go in the cave and do the work. It's like, no, no, no. This is I think more in the lineage of music, athletics, all sorts of things where you have the coach who's there with you physically and like is watching your form, and you can't hide it, you can't fake it, you can't say no. I'll throw the ball at home, and if I have a question, I'll shoot you an email.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It was more or less on target. Yeah, no, it was good.
Right.
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So seeing where they go versus what where that kind of work can really take place. And so, as far as any other ideas I have, well, the one is we've touched on is like the languaging is super, super relevant. Language, how it's talked about, the words used really matter. There's a really popular um, guy podcaster in the space. His name's Chris Williamson or Chris Williams. I forget if it's Williamson or not, but he has a huge audience. But he was saying that there was a campaign, I think it was targeting young men, but it was at least targeting depression. And the slogan was, "It's okay to talk." And he said, even though he was the exact target audience, he was like, I hated those ads. He's like, because I don't want to talk. I want to do something about it. I don't want to just talk about it. So the languaging of that ad again fell into this thing of, oh, just be open, guys. Hey guys, just be vulnerable, be open. That's not the language that's going to work in 99% of cases, even if it's the same net result. Like it's going to result in some kind of vulnerability and
Mhm.
openness. If you and I put up a sales page tomorrow that says, hey guys, let's hang out and be vulnerable, you can imagine what the click-through rate is going to be.
Yeah.
So the language really matters. Now, if you're talking about the hero's journey, confronting, your fear in a way that actually can move you through it, can move you, learn how to, face your inner demons or your emotions. Now it might sound cliche, like, oh, it doesn't have to be ultra machismo. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the language really matters, which is why I think about things like, do I, call it inner work, emotional work versus certain other things, which will naturally just, oh, that doesn't apply to me. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember was last year we did the series Advancing Man.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. And that idea of, oh, okay, it's kind of implies growth without it's moving forward. It's like, so it's not just sitting down and talking. It's like, what
Mm-hmm.
I'm because we're goal oriented as human beings. We often, and other people out there goes, oh, goals don't work. And other people, it's all about the goal. It's like, we are goal setting machines. We set a goal to get out of bed. We set a goal to make breakfast. we,
Yeah, you're doing tapping for some reason.
yeah, yeah.
There's
There's
some
a,
objective.
I want to advance. I want to move forward. I want to have things be better. I want to feel better. I want to do better. I want to live better. And creating that, and recognizing it's a holistic thing. It's not a matter of, well, as long as you get all the marks on the surface scoreboard of the wealth and the family and the house and all that. If you got a sports car, you're driving a Lamborghini, then who cares what your emotional life is like?
Right.
Well, I'd rather really enjoy the Lamborghini if that's what I'm into,
Mm-hmm.
rather than feeling a need to, if I'm having it to impress, rather than actually enjoying the experience.
Yeah, that's often the only outlet. If you look at what a lot of, and I would put this on the healthier side. The healthier side of places men can go on YouTube are, again, there's sort of the personal development and very masculine stuff, which is all fine, but the sort of challenges, right? Like, okay, for 30 days or for 6 months, I got up at 5 every morning, and I started writing down my goals, and yeah, you see that, and there is a certain, like, yeah, man, good for you. Like, it's great that you're doing that, but often at the end of that, you see, like, okay, and then, like, okay, I'm being super disciplined, and I've gotten more productivity, and that always eventually hits up. If that's all you're doing, it hits up against. So then what? Like, do I have to do that more? Am I now failing if I have a pizza one day? What is the ultimate point of just challenging myself? And if I get to the point I'm doing ultra marathons, well, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get a sense of purpose and fulfillment out of it. If you're doing it simply to chase that, like, okay, I'm just going to be super disciplined, and this is what I believe happens. I'm going to be super disciplined, which, again, better than not, right? I mean, if you're a story of, like, I felt no purpose and I was just kind of depressed and, getting out of shape, and I got on this discipline train and I improved my life. I mean, I'm like the first to applaud that. But what sometimes happens is there's this implication that, okay, just be ultra disciplined, just become successful, and then, like, somewhere, somehow, that just results in this feeling of satisfaction and purpose and fulfillment. And it doesn't, unless you happen to be one of those people who's wired in such a way where that happens to be the thing.
Yeah.
You happen to be an athlete, and you find, like, athletics is my purpose, and getting up at 5 in the morning and doing these runs actually gives you that. But a lot of people, it doesn't. So men are just sort of chasing this discipline high
Yeah.
without, like, it actually landing on, okay, how do I explore what actually moves me, what matters to me? Now we're getting kind of flowery with the language again, like, but that's where
Yeah.
there's a distinction there.
Yeah. There's that. Yeah. That I'll be happy when, maybe, but even if I'm not happy, at least I'm on the scoreboard, and people will, and I get my brownie points, and at my eulogy, they'll be able to say, well, he succeeded at this and he succeeded at that, and he was on the scoreboard, and he was a winner, whatever. um It's that those superficial markers, and it's not. And again, I have nothing against success, financial success, or any of that. That's all great, but if it's what what good is it if a man inherits the earth but loses himself?
Yeah. And, unfortunately, I do think that a lot of a lot of us, it's not just men, but I mean, if you get to the place where it's like the idea of, let's call it inner peace, contentment, happiness, some sort of self-regulating or ability to kind of generate a sense of well-being from within, if that is either not exposed to or seen completely unrealistic, which I think is the case for many people. They don't even expose to that as a possibility, let alone believe it's real. If this really is a dog eat dog world, and most of us are going to be kind of just angsty and anxious and frustrated, and that's just the game, that's how it is anyway. So you might as well be one of the winners, then absolutely you can't argue with that. If that was actually the truth,
Yeah,
and it can seem true.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's so funny because we then, so many people will say, oh well, we can look at heroes, you know the Buddha or Jesus or people like this. It's like, oh yeah, these were the ultimate. Okay, well, these guys were not you know macho millionaires. um and so it's like, well, that's a nice as an, well, what you said, it's not realistic, so it's a nice as an ideal, but come on, let's get real. That's not going to happen for me. So let's so I'm going to be this. And if I not going to be that, then I'm going to be in a state of anger because I feel like I'm not worth I'm not worthy, and I'm useless, just as you were saying earlier, that
Mhm.
it's like either you're king of the mountain or you're worthless and useless. And and it's like, well, I want to work on my emotional self. It's like, you don't have time for that.
Yes.
There's a mountain to climb.
Yes. Yes. When ironically too, emotional work absolutely helps with all of the practical stuff. I mean, in a monumental way.
As I have done this work, I mean, the success that I've been able to enjoy over the last many years, all due to going inside and working on this. When I was trying to, as an actor, have that kind of external success without dealing with who I was as a person, it wasn't going anywhere. And I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of people for whom it did go someplace, and it didn't go someplace good.
True.
The money, the fame, but not happiness. Um, you know, and so yeah, it's I'm, knock wood, enjoying a holistic level of success because I deal with what's going on emotionally, and then also allowing myself to succeed in by the metrics of oh, I have this many YouTube followers or
Mhm.
whatever the thing is, make this much money each month, whatever. um but that it's like, yeah, that's all nice, but it's living a life on purpose and going, no, I love what I do and I feel good about who I am. And the rest is just icing on the cake as opposed to the cake.
Yeah. And in my case, being someone who you often hear the comment, "Wow, you get paid to do what you love, which is play the bass, be a jazz
Mm,
musician in New York City." I mean, that would not have been possible without the emotional work. I mean, the stress of that, the competition of that. I was not one of the blessed, talented ones who just sounded amazing, so to be able to kind of endure that, to be able to do what I love, there's just no way. I would have crashed and burned out of New York within 3 months if I didn't have some sort of tools to deal with, like, oh my God, I suck. Everyone's better than me. How am I possibly going to pay my bills? Okay, I have a couple gigs, but my whole identity rides on whether or not this gig comes through or not. I mean, it's a lot to navigate, and I don't know how anyone does it without tapping or something. But in some ways, they
Or
don't. In some
well,
cases,
and that's why you hear of so many people in artistic fields, using, self-medicating in all kinds of unhealthy ways, because it is a stressful, I mean, life has stress,
yeah, life is
whatever
stress.
profession is, but certainly artistic, that kind of, gigging economy is has these stresses that most people don't think about. We go to a show and we enjoy listening to the music. We don't think, wow, I wonder what that person's going to be doing next week. you know
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I hope they have another gig. um, when I was an actor, I was studying at ACT in San Francisco, and John Rubinstein was came and spoke to us, and he's doing love letters on stage in San Francisco, and he said, I've been in this business for 25 years, and when this show ends next week, I'll be unemployed again.
Yeah, and he's not kidding.
Yeah, you know, and it's there are these pressures, and if you don't have, and this thing is, we don't, that's why I'm such an advocate for tapping, because we are not taught how to deal with stress. We are taught how to deal with food building up on our teeth. Brush your teeth. But in terms of the stress, so we have these outlets like, smoking or drinking or engaging in unhealthy behavior, that this is how you deal with that stress. It's a cliche with successful business people. Yeah, well, we go have these wild weekends in the Cayman Islands, because you gotta do something to let the steam off. And well, we'll worry about the consequences later. We're making so much money, it doesn't matter. Um, so it's having that way, just recognizing, like, stress is there, and most of us are walking around with one of these that is constantly saying, here's something else to be upset about,
Yes.
in case you weren't upset enough. So we have, even if we're not totally uptight, we have these ambient levels of stress, and most of us have no healthy way of dealing with that, and we're not even aware of the toll that it takes, you know obviously, psychologically and physically. It manifests as all kinds of physical and emotional issues, but professionally, uh, there's all kinds of ways that it hinders our performance. There's all kinds of ways that it gets in the way of our relationships. There are so many um, unfortunate consequences to this unprocessed stress. And so, yeah, if we truly want to succeed in a holistic way, we need to address that and allow ourselves to be healthier human beings.
Yeah, and for the men, a new way, probably the biggest way that that has manifested is isolation. Especially, you got the computer, you have unlimited access to everything on the internet. There's a lot of men who've checked out of dating, relationships, all that stuff. All good. The tapping, these other tools, you can actually do them in your cave, in your isolation for a bit. I mean, try it. It's going to be it's my big thing with the emotional work. I made like one video talking to men in particular. It's like, it doesn't have to be, if I say, hey, you've checked out of dating, you checked out of relationships, you're mostly just in there focusing on yourself. I am not saying, hey, let's try some tapping, let's try some emotional work so that you can become the guy you're supposed to be who goes out and dates. And no, 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 none of that. That you can by yourself, as an art form, as a skill, as a practice, as a challenge, as an adventure, actually work with your own emotions in a way that is satisfying and possibly sustaining as an end in and of itself. It's
Exactly.
not, oh, feel better because if you do some tapping, then we're going to be what society wants you to be, and then you'll be able to be the guy who lifts weights and goes to no, no, no. It's literally just your own video game inside yourself that has its own much better reward.
Yeah, excellent. Because in terms of what I was saying earlier about, the goal and the advancing man and going for that goal. Yeah, the goal is not I'm doing this so that I can get that partner, or I can get that job, or I can reach that achievement. It's like ultimately the goal is I'm living a life that I love. And being able to do that on your own. So when people say, well, I want to work on myself so I can get into a relationship and then I can finally be in that loving relationship, I'm like, great. I would say learn to be happy whether you ever have a relationship or not. And I'm not saying you can never have a relationship. I hope that you have one. But if it's, I'll be happy when I have that relationship, then there's always going to be this, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. And being able to just say, I really like who I am. There's a lot of awesomeness in here. And then what comes after that, you know, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all these other things shall be added unto you. To me, that kingdom of heaven is that sense of peace.
Mm-hmm.
I whether or not I become a multimillionaire, whether or not I have a gold medal, whether or not I have that perfect family,
Right.
I'm already awesome. And I can love myself without any of that. And funny how those things get drawn to me as I allow myself to be this best version of myself. So that being that happy self, that's the goal that we're advancing towards. And you know, pick up those gold coins like in the video game along the
Yeah.
way. But the gold coins aren't the goal. They're again the icing on the cake.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I hope that gives something useful to everyone interested in this. And I'd say um, for men who've stumbled across this or who have been kind of silently watching from the sides, one thing I could encourage is you could email me directly because I know sometimes people don't always want to leave comments for such types of things. You of course can leave a comment, but you could just email me directly, just innerworkwithevan.com, or yeah, you see my name there on the Zoom screen. That would take you to my music page as well. So hey, any tappings on this? Like no videos talking about this, and I'll compile a list, and maybe I'll do something. I could maybe send it to Brad, see if he has any ideas with that. But I know that you have these requests. I know you're like, man, I wish someone would do a tapping on X, Y, or Z. But I'm not afraid to put it out there. It's just like you said. It all plays into that. Like, well, we don't know if people want it because the men are often not speaking up about it for all these reasons we mentioned. So that's one call to action I was thinking of is just email me. You can do it anonymously. I don't care. You can use the form on my website or something, and say you guys ever talk about this? This is my frustration because man, when you work with men one on one, I'm sure Brad, it's amazing. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and kind of like there's part of me that wants to get more of that in the broader space, but I understand why it's not.
Yeah, yeah. It's always very encouraging and exciting when I see comments on YouTube from guys coming up, guys showing up in my classes. I starting to have more male clients.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Uh, yeah, and it's like, okay, maybe we're moving is where you know guys are more guys are being open to this growth, this holistic success. It's like, yeah, I don't want just the trappings, but I want to be a full human being who feels good inside rather than just looking good on paper.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Brad, and
Well, thank you
yeah,
for encouraging this. I this will be it started with the advancing man. I mean, let me just make this all part of the whole advancing man
yeah,
thing, but and yeah, we'll continue this.
yeah. And
And
I doubt you think of it this way. You could tell me if not, but I mean, I think this is another guy thing. You probably don't necessarily think of yourself as like a role model for other guys, whereas I don't necessarily think of it of myself that for someone half my age, not that I'm half your age, but um,
Close,
where
but
we're guys, we kind of focused and doing our thing,
yeah.
but you get to serve as, no, here is a adult man who is actually fulfilled in doing what he likes to do and loves to do and is making a difference without making a big bravado about that. And I think that's an important thing. And I think if we can kind of encourage that sort of like, it doesn't have to be ostentatious. You don't have to call yourself the men's coach. You don't have to take on that energy, but that just doing what you do, put it out there. The more men that are doing that with whatever it is, I think plays a bigger impact than we might realize, because there is a lack of role models, especially in this space with men, I would say. So, you know,
Thank you.
thanks for your role in that, and anyone else we can encourage to kind of step into that role.
Well, and likewise, you're doing it as well, and we have a number of colleagues that are out there doing that, and there's room for more.
Oh yeah,
Men are welcome.
men are welcome. Absolutely. Cool. Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for sticking around to the end. I really appreciate it, and we'll keep to be continued, I hope.
Thanks, Evan.